Hi, Mary. How are you? Can you hear me? Good afternoon. This is Charles Robinson. Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Hello.
Good afternoon, Marlo. How are you?
Hello, Charles. Does my audio work?
Yes, it does.
Great. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Shall I briefly check if my PowerPoint works?
So we're going to get started here. The order in which we'll go, we're going to go first with Josh, then you, Marlo. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Marlou, yes. Thank you.
And then 3, we're going to go Zishan, and then 4, we're going to go Abu, Ashik, MD Erfam. I want to make sure I pronounce everybody's name properly. So you're Dr. Merlu Slot. Is that correct pronunciation?
Correct.
Okay, awesome. And Dr. Josh, how you pronounce your last name, Josh?
Well, I'm not a doctor, so
Okay.
you don't have to put that, but it's Apanavicius.
Apanavicius.
Up and Avicius. You don't have to say it if you don't want to. It's fine.
If I butcher it, please forgive me.
Trust me.
I'm gonna try.
No, trust. I've heard much worse. So
right, and Chris Bishop's on the line, and Chris and I are partnered together here. Adrian, I don't think is going to make it. Adrian's our head of the tech, and I'm the vice chair. And so the way this is going to work is, and I'm going to share my screen real quick. We're going to have roughly around 15 minutes each, 4 of you guys. Save some time at the end for questions. I'm going to let everybody know that they can put questions in the chat, and hopefully we'll get some questions and get to you guys. Now, I know you guys prepared questions. I'm at GON. I didn't get a chance to get all those questions. So organized. So unfortunately, I'm hoping folks will ask questions. If they don't, then I will ask you a question based on what you present. And so let me just pull up the order so you can see in which way we're going. And I'm going to share one screen, and I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So, all right, let me just see here. I'm going to just share everything. Shoot, I ain't got time for this. Share screen. All right. You guys should be looking at the order, correct?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. So I'm just going to tell everybody welcome. And this is what I'm going to read. And I'm going to introduce you guys by name. And I'm going to read your presentation, and then you go. I'm going to read all of this as fast as I can to get the first person going. And that's what we're going to do. All right. So let me go ahead and unshare screen. Now, I am the person who has the con. So can you, Marlu, share your screen, see if you can do it
Yes.
real quick as a test? Good.
Does it
All right,
work?
take it down. So that means
Yeah.
everybody can do it. All right, so you can take it down. So we're all set. Now let's just hope everyone comes.
Yeah. Cool.
Hale, how are you? Welcome.
Hello.
It's the mic check. I just want to make sure I can hear you. And
Hello.
awesome. Okay, so we're going to give everybody a couple of minutes just to join. It looks like we have about 10 folks here, so we'll get started in a minute. All right. Okay, we're right about 2:01. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charles Robinson, and I am the Quantum Economic Development Consortium Workforce TAC Vice Chair. And on behalf of Adrian German, who is the chair, I will be moderating today's talk, student e-poster session. Welcome to the Quantum Economic Development Consortium Workforce TAC Student Research e-poster session. We have 4 researchers presenting today. We have Josh Aponak-Vicius from Indiana University in Bloomington, and Josh has a master's. He's a master's student, and he is getting an MS in Quantum Information Science program at IUB. We also have Dr. Marlu Slot, who is a postdoctoral researcher at NIST, Georgetown, formerly from Utrecht University in the Netherlands. We also have Zashan P. Kazi, who is a University of Washington PhD candidate in physics in the Kai Mi Fu group. We also have Abu Ashik Ephraim from Indiana University of Bloomington. Ephraim is a PhD candidate in physics in Geraldo Oritz group. They will be presenting their research papers. Josh starting out with Morse potential on quantum computer for molecules in supersymmetric quantum mechanics. Dr. Marlu on atom by atom, designing and realizing electronic quantum matter. And of course, Kazi, who is presenting on wide field magnetic imaging and a ferromagnetic and nanoparticle fields using quantum defects in diamond for DNA and orientation measurements, as well as Abu with quantum entanglement probe scattering theory. So first up, we have Josh. So right now we're going to work on a 15-minute boundary. We're going to ask the presenters to save a few minutes for questions. And if anyone has questions, please put those questions in the chat. And then towards the end of each person's presentation, we'll ask those questions. And so without further ado, Josh.
Yeah.
If you want to go out at like 5-ish.
Yeah.
Go ahead and start.
It's good.
Let's get water and what else?
I would ask that everyone please mute their line.
Oh, you want salad today?
And I believe, John, that's you that we can hit background information on. So I will see if I can mute you. Is Josh here?
Yeah,
Okay, go ahead. Take it away, Josh.
sure. Thank you. I'll just go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that?
We can see it.
Great. So yes, like Charles said, today I'll be presenting on Morse potential on a quantum computer for molecules and supersymmetric quantum mechanics. So just kind of a quick background, we use the Morse potential because it describes bound state energies of diatomic molecules like hydrogen and things like that. But also it has soluble solutions. That means that you can, the Schrodinger equation can be analytically determined, meaning that you can find all of the eigenstates and eigenvalues, which just makes it a good research tool. So you can develop kind of methods using this potential, and then you could build off those to go into more complex and different potentials. So that's why we use the Morse potential. And now to find these eigenvalues in vectors, we use what is known as the variational quantum eigensolver, or VQE for short. Now VQE, it's known as a hybrid algorithm because it actually uses quantum and classical algorithms kind of in one. And so the quantum part is the quantum state preparation. So you can, the quantum computer prepares the quantum states, and then it actually computes the expectation value of the Hamiltonian. But I don't know how familiar people are with approximation methods in quantum mechanics, but one very, very popular approximation method is the variational method, which is another reason, hence the name VQE. And essentially,
Is Nugget getting a bath?
Oh, sorry. And essentially, VQE is very powerful because you can find an upper bound for the ground state energy of a Hamiltonian just by finding the expectation value of that Hamiltonian given any ansatz wave function. This is outlined in equation 1 right there. And again, this just means that it's powerful because you don't have to solve any differential equations. You just have to calculate the expectation value, which is usually somewhat trivial. And we used the quantum information software kit from IBM. They have a very nice VQE implementation in that API. So yeah, and but one thing is that we're actually trying to find not only the ground state, but also the first excited state. And as you may have noticed that the VQE can only find an upper bound for the ground state. And so to kind of get past that, we use methods from supersymmetric quantum mechanics. And using that, you can actually construct a partner potential, and in turn, a partner Hamiltonian. Examples of these are down in equations 2 and 3. So these are actually V plus is the normal Morse potential, and then V minus is the partner potential. And so what you do is that you construct a Hamiltonian such that the new Hamiltonian's ground state is actually the first excited state of the original one that you're interested in, which is kind of hard to understand verbally, but easy to understand when you look at figure 2. So this first blue curve is just the regular Morse potential with the ground state energy down here. And then using supersymmetric quantum mechanics, you construct the partner potential, which is this green line. And as you can see, the ground state energy of that corresponds to the first excited state of the original potential. And so that's all kind of been background for the actual running of simulations. So one quick caveat is that this was all work done back in January of 2020. A lot has happened since then. So kind of my results are very, very preliminary. I've linked to the archive paper down in the bottom right. That's that contains this, that was published, I think, February of this year, so it's much more up to date. But all this data was very preliminary. And so essentially we just ran VQE for different numbers of qubits and different bases. And so we actually ran it many times, but this table under the results is kind of the best. And so it just kind of outlines, we have the ground state and the first excited state energies. And then, like I was saying, VQE is a hybrid algorithm. So they have a lot of different classical optimizers that you can use, like the SPSA or simultaneous perturbation stochastic approximation, all these other things. So when you see optimizer, these are all just kind of the different classical optimizers that were minimizing the expectation value of the Hamiltonian. And as you can see, that some of the errors are quite large. At the time, we didn't really figure out what was going on with that. But again, if you look at the archive paper, it looks like they were able to figure it out. And so, yeah, and then this is just the plots over here on the right are just kind of visualizing the best convergences that we saw for the ground state and the first excited state. Looks like SPSA did the best. And so, yeah, while I was at Brookhaven, this was all kind of preliminary stuff. So we didn't actually get to, I personally didn't run any of the simulations for any actual diatomic molecules. These were all of these simulations were just done for just very general states of boson or systems of bosons and fermions. But actually, if you this link to the paper, you'll actually see that they do they were able to run the algorithm on lots of different diatomic molecules. Yeah, so hydrogen, hydrochloric acid, all that. And so, yeah, it's hard for me to kind of comment on it because most of my work was in the very preliminary kind of writing all the code to kind of get these simulations going, which if you would like to see, there's also a GitHub repo where I have all of it. You're more than welcome to code. I also wrote some tutorials, so if you want to learn more about VQE and what we did or what I did on this project, then hopefully my documentation is good enough that you could run it yourself. And you could actually, IBM made it very easy to run it on a simulator, so you can kind of make sure the algorithm works well, and then you can send it to one of their actual quantum machines that they have running. All right, I think that's about it. Acknowledgements. Again, this was the project was supported by the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science and Workforce Development for Teachers and Scientists. This was a part of the Science Undergraduate Laboratory Internships Program, or SULI, back in 2020. And that's about it. It's been about 9.5 minutes, so I think I'll stop it there and take any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Josh. That was a great presentation. I don't see any questions in the chat. The only thing I did see there was they would like you to put the links to the papers in the chat if you could. But
Yeah, I'll do that.
I have a couple of questions. One, supersymmetric quantum mechanics is relatively.
I have a meeting.
Oh, yeah, me right now?
Yeah, but
Can you please mute
Look
your
how I know
line? I'm
Okay.
trying to figure out who's on
could I
here.
speak quickly?
I got my computer this time.
Okay, so the question, Josh, I have for you
You got it.
is,
If you got it.
looking at the results, and I'm gonna try to see if I can mute everyone here. I gotta figure this out here, how to mute everyone. Looking at the results,
Will stay only 20 minutes
Yeah,
at most.
okay, I gotta figure out how to mute everybody here.
Who's talking, man?
I don't know. Let me see, mute all. Where is the mute all button? All right, they stopped talking. But looking at supersymmetric quantum mechanics and their results, I mean, the first external state that you raised up with supersymmetric quantum mechanics, have you had the opportunity to use the new runtime environment for VQE, which could be some of the potential of the error that you've seen because of the performance challenge with VQE, because it is a classical to quantum connection. And the new runtime environment, has you had the opportunity to leverage that? I'm sure you saw that on the roadmap there from my.
Yeah, I saw that. I don't think so. Yeah, like I said, this was about a year and a half ago. So I think if you look in the GitHub repo that I linked, I put all of the version information, and I was looking at it. I think we were using version like 0.16, and I just got on Qiskit's GitHub, and I think the latest stable release is around 30. So about 16 iterations more. But yeah, I think I'm sure that they were able to leverage that going forward after I left, because it looks like they were able to mitigate those errors.
Yeah, and so when you did the error analysis, did you have any indication of what those errors could be from? They're fairly large with the optimizers, and you said that SBSA was the best, but if you look across both first external state and exact energy state, all of them are fairly large for the bottom three. Is there anything that you can kind of point to kind of determine why that is, or how much did you look into that?
Yeah, I think it's because we did a lot of the simulations with the state vector simulator, and those the errors were very, very good, but that's the state vector simulator is an idealization, so it's essentially a noiseless quantum computer. But then once you move to the QASM simulator, and I hope none of the names have changed. I'm not sure, but that's what they were called back when I was doing it. And these were all with the QASM simulator, so they were very, very noisy machines. So we think that was the main. Looking back, we think that's probably where the main source of the error was, because we also kind of building and debugging all of these things, we were also running these simulations on just a normal harmonic oscillator, just the normal parabolic kind of potential, and we got very, very small errors again with the state vector simulator, and then kind of they blew up when we switched to QASM.
Awesome. So the only thing I would encourage you to do is to look at the new runtime environment for VQE. I had seen for the hydrogen atom, as an example, that they have reduced the amount of time significantly with the new runtime environment. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. And the new VQE classical to quantum. If you shorten the footprint right now, VQE, the way it works is the IBM quantum computers in the cloud. If you got a classical system connected to the cloud, that latency causes error. And so the idea of the runtime environment is to shorten that path so you can get better results. So I would encourage you to look at that. So thank you. Is there any other questions in the chat for Josh? He did an outstanding job. Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next up, we got Dr. Marlou Slot. Marlou?
Yes, thank you very much, Charles. It's a great pleasure to be here. This is the preview of my talk. You see 3 lattices, artificial lattices created in a scanning tunneling microscope. And there are electrons in here in these different geometries, these different band structures that actually don't exist in nature. They also all haven't been chemically synthesized in a lab yet. They do exist theoretically, but before finding a way to creating them, we didn't know how electrons in these geometries, in these band structures would behave experimentally. Band structures are decisive for the properties of materials. Silicon, the band gap makes it a semiconductor. Graphene, a linear dispersion at the Riemann zone corners, gives it its special properties. And many exotic phenomena like superconductivity, correlated insulating behavior are due to a flat band in an electronic band structure. Flat band means the electrons are not moving, they have no kinetic energy, they're just sitting in their lattice spots, and there they actually experience interactions with other electrons, and that gives rise to exotic phenomena. Band structures are not only due to the kind of atoms we have in material, but an important factor is also the geometry. For example, graphene, this linear dispersion is solely due to the carbon atoms being in a honeycomb geometry. Now, graphene, we know it and it exists, but how about any band structures we can think of theoretically and that don't exist? How can we investigate them experimentally? And I'm talking about electrons, not photons or something else. So first key is the tool, the instrument, and we use the scanning tunneling microscope. In the scanning tunneling microscope, we bring an atomically sharp needle. Here you see one atom at the apex, close to a surface, a few nanometers. And there it is so sensitive to the surface that it can measure individual atoms. If you bring it even closer to the surface, you can move atoms on the surface or molecules on the surface around, and you can manipulate them into the desired positions where you want them. And then you can actually use an STM also to measure the density of states, which reflects the band structure. The second key, creating atoms artificially. Here on the left, you see a quantum coral. It exists of a copper 111 crystal, and that has a 2D electron gas at its surface. Now, if you put atoms on this surface, you see a ring of iron atoms here. They scatter these electrons at the surface, these electronic waves, and this standing wave pattern can be interpreted as orbitals of artificial atom. And then the last step, we want to couple these atoms into the lattice with the geometry that we want. So here, a honeycomb lattice is shown. We know this one already. Now I would like to show you how to couple artificial atoms into a flat band geometry. On the left, you see the geometry of a leap lattice, a square lattice, but with one left out every time. So it exists of 3 atoms in a unit cell, 2 red ones at the edge, and 1 blue one in the corner. And you might already think it is interesting because this looks very similar to the copper oxide plane in high temperature superconductors. We think it is even more interesting because if we calculate it, we see a flat band showing up, which intersects a linear dispersion, which we know from graphene, the Dirac cone. So if we would be able to realize this and measure this, what we expect to see in the local density of states is a peak reflecting this flat band, and this would be expected to show up at these red edge atoms or artificial atoms. And then we see peaks due to this, coming from this linear dispersion on both the corners and a little bit on the edges. I will, in the rest of my talk, I will show this density of states like this. How to do it? We want to basically put atoms on copper to scatter the electrons on these sides, which means that we have to block all of the other spots where the electrons could have been otherwise. And calculating what we expect for this geometry, we indeed find something here that looks like a flattish band, which gives us confidence. And we need this confidence because it is a lot of work to create such a structure in the scanning tunneling microscope. Here on the right, you see the realization. Here we manipulated more than 625 carbon monoxide molecules, which we used as the scatterers, on their positions on the copper 111 crystal to scatter the electrons here on the leaf lattice sides. And now we will see if this actually worked out, because now we have a certain geometry, but do the electrons actually notice this geometry? Do they know that they are in a leaf lattice, and do they create a flat band? So this is now what we are going to measure in the STM. First, we place our tip above this spot. We can do that with atomic precision again. We take a spectrum which reflects the density of state, again indicating the band structure. And yes, a clear peak shows up in the middle, indicating the flat band. Now we place ourselves at this corner side, and there is no peak from a flat band as expected, only 2 peaks reflecting the further dispersion. So this is a strong proof. And if we visualize it spatially, we see that this is homogeneous over the whole structure. We see here at the energy of the flat band intensity at the edge sides, while at the energy of the Dirac cone, we see it at the corners, the exact characteristic of a leaf lattice. So with this, I showed you how we successfully simulated a leaf lattice. One of our many examples that we built, including a fractal structure or a Kagome lattice. And with that, I showed you that CO on copper is a highly tunable platform to simulate electronic quantum matter. Right now, I showed you that we created a flat band, but I didn't show you superconductivity yet. So that would be in the outlook. We need new manipulation platforms in which we can not only create these band structures, but also have the electrons interact in those. In our case, it means having no bulk, which in the copper screen the electrons between of the surface state electrons. So for example, by using 2D materials, or we can use van der Waals heterostructures, for example, twisted by a small angle to create also geometries where electrons would sit preferentially to create a flat band. I would like to acknowledge all my co-workers from Utrecht University, both the theoretical and the experimental team. And with that, I would like to conclude, and I'm open to questions.
If there's any questions, please put them in the chat. Let me just say, Dr. Slot, that was an awesome presentation, and I was very impressed by it. So to do, to build materials electronically as an electrical engineer, that's something that I can appreciate. So I have a couple of questions for you. And thank you for putting the scanning tunneling microscope picture of IBM there. That was done out of the TJ Watson Research Laboratory. And of course, you guys know the history of the scanning tunneling microscope. So you know, the leaf lattice, you said that using the carbon dioxide molecule, you use 125, that you were able to notice, no matter where you were in the structure, the same flat band. There was no environmentals injected in that process that made the measurements at those locations different. They were all the same.
Yes, so we showed that we really forced the electrons into this geometry.
Mm-hmm. And they all were there perfectly at every instance.
Exactly, yeah, and this flat band originates from this geometry. So we should be able to measure that at every spot, which was the case. Now, however, we could of course, only built a finite size. So we have some finite size effects at the edges. The best measurement is in the middle.
Okay,
We have a particle in a box modulated with our structure.
of course, there was different influences on the outside edges and opposed to the centers. I get that. So that is actually, what was the process? You said that the process to create the couple of electrons was a difficult process, and it was. So you mentioned all of the process. Can you reiterate what those processes are real quick for us? Because I was trying to write it down and I kind of missed each. It was a 3-step process, right? So can you just recall that so I can make sure?
We call this an analog electronic quantum simulator to create those lattices. Later also with interactions, as long as we don't have the perfect quantum computers yet to calculate those. These lattices only exist at 4 Kelvin or lower. We have a copper crystal which has electrons at its surface. Then we leak in carbon monoxide gas, very low concentration, that will just scatter around at the surface anywhere. And then we come close with our STM tip to manipulate them in the right positions. And there they will sit for weeks as long as we stay at 4 Kelvin.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That's a great explanation.
Yeah, and then our 3 ingredients would be the I see my internet is getting weak.
We caught it all. So thank you very much, Marlo. We appreciate that presentation. Are there any other questions from anyone else in the audience? Awesome, great job. So next up we have Zashan Kazi. Are you there? You're welcome to start.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, Charles.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. All right, so yeah, thanks for introducing all of us, Charles. My name is Zishan. I'm a physics PhD student at the University of Washington. I'm in the lab right now, so that's why I got the mask on. We're keeping it COVID safe. Yeah, so I'm really excited today to talk to you about some of the work that we're doing here. We're looking right now at individual DNA molecule bend stiffness. And we want to probe this using some quantum technology. So we're going to do quantum magnetic imaging of magnetic nanoparticles. So just to back up really quick to talk about the biology, by the way, at the top here are some of our nanoparticle orientation images that I'm going to show you in a second. But to talk about the biology, kind of have to go a little quick here in 10 minutes. But so our first motivation here is to look at DNA flexibility. And this DNA flexibility has a key role in many biological processes, especially at these small length scales. And so when I say small length scales, I mean about the persistence length of DNA, which is close to 50 nanometers. There are many models that aim to quantify this bend stiffness and experiments that have been done. And basically there is a big disconnect between the models. The models predict bending of DNA at these small length scales that appears much more than, experiments have shown a much higher bending or much more higher bending probability than the models suggest. This has been shown in, on the left, I'm showing DNA adsorbed onto a surface, and there are atomic force microscopy images showing the bending. So that is one way to quantify the DNA bending. And on the right here, I'm showing this looping experiment in which 2 fluorescent molecules are constructed at 2 opposite ends of DNA. When the DNA loops, they're able to image that looping. So from that looping rate, they predict something much higher than what the models predict for the looping of DNA. So what we want to do is this kind of experiment as well, but on a really enabled by some quantum technology. So what we want to do is take an individual fragment of DNA, attach it to a sensor, and then put a nanoparticle at the other end of that sensor, a ferromagnetic nanoparticle. Then when we torque this ferromagnetic nanoparticle, we can see how much, torque it via an external applied magnetic field. We call that a magnetic tweezer. So we use a magnetic tweezer to torque the magnetic nanoparticle and then see how much that magnetic nanoparticle orientation deviates from our applied field. That deviation is given by the DNA exerting a torque on the magnetic nanoparticle. So it's a pretty simple experiment. We are changing an orientation of a field, measuring the imaging and orientation of our magnetic nanoparticle attached to DNA, And then with this torque balance equation that I'm writing here, we can measure all of these relevant parameters using our quantum platform, and ultimately are able to probe the, or ultimately we want to probe the bend stiffness of DNA at these small length scales. So let me tell you, let's talk a little bit about our magnetic sensing platform. So what we're using is a near surface ensemble of diamond nitrogen vacancy centers to do this. And so these are very biocompatible. They live inside diamond. This is kind of a schematic of our sensing platform. We have a bulk diamond substrate in which we fabricate a thin layer of our nitrogen vacancy centers on top. And by fabricating this layer, we have a wide field magnetic imaging platform. So we address with a wide field laser and collect with a camera. And under certain optical and radio frequency excitation conditions, the amount of light emitted by the NV centers changes with magnetic field. So this is how we're able to image these little tiny ferromagnetic nanoparticles. Schematically in the microscope, what it kind of looks like is this. So we have an objective lens. We image through the back of a diamond, and we are able to, since it's biocompatible and everything is very nice at room temperature, the sensitivity is nice at room temperature, we're able to house the diamond inside a fluid chamber, which also houses the biology. So we make our DNA tethers with the nanoparticles and stick them directly to the diamond surface, in which the NV layer is at the top face. Then we have several other controls. There's a radio frequency antenna that supplies the radio frequencies required to manipulate the NV center qubits. And then we have some external magnetic fields. One of them is a static field to split the degeneracy of the NV centers in the crystal. And then the other one is the magnetic tweezer field, which will be used to torque the magnetic nanoparticles. So yeah, and then here's a picture of our microscope, just kind of the same pieces, but with with all of our nice optics. So I'm not going to talk too much about this, but this is the energy level diagram for an individual NV center, and it basically explains how we do our sensing. But I think I'll just cut to the chase for lack of time. On the right, what we can see is an optical resonance curve. And this is what I was speaking more about prior. I mentioned that the amount of light that an NV center emits changes with magnetic field. And this is how it changes. It's an optical resonance. So there's a ground state Zeeman splitting, and that Zeeman splitting changes the spin, changes the spin levels, and those spins are at about 3 gigahertz. Sorry, those energy transitions are about at 3 gigahertz under zero field. And when there is a magnetic field applied, those energy levels shift. That shift is read out optically. So the resonant frequency of our curve shifts with applied magnetic field. And we can measure, we can read out this resonance by using pulsed laser and radio frequency excitation. So this is how we do our wide field imaging. And by using, going back to this energy level diagram, there are, for the NV center, it's a spin 1 system. So there's a symmetric splitting of the MS plus minus 1 levels in the magnetic field. And people have used this to great effect in order to mitigate non-magnetic contributions to the signal. So I just want to advertise a little bit of our prior work. What we were able to show prior is by using two of our resonances associated with each NV center and actually biasing the RF in a kind of clever way on the outer and the inner inflection points of this resonance curve, we're able to mitigate a lot of the inhomogeneities due to strain, electric field, and strain and electric field primarily in our imaging, and take really, really fast, high time resolution magnetic images. So what I'm showing on the right here is a little magnetic nanoparticle held to the surface of the diamond by a fragment of DNA. And we're able to image the orientation of that single domain ferromagnet. In this case, I'm showing 200 milliseconds. So if you are interested in this dynamic imaging work, you can check out our paper from this year. So that is the dynamic side. So now let me go back to speaking about this torque experiment that we want to do. So in the prior case, I was just showing one orientation sensing. But because of the symmetry of diamond and the way that the NV center is allowed to form in the diamond, there are 4 possible orientations. And these 4 possible orientations are Zeeman split by a different amount in a 3-dimensional magnetic field. So this is how we are able to use our NV sensors to actually not only measure magnetic fields, but even get the three components, Bx, By, and Bz, kind of reading it out from this model. So yeah, from this full ODMR spectrum, we are able to measure the full total applied field to our NV sensors, which is composed of the fields that we apply, plus the fields produced by our magnetic nanoparticles. So just looking a little bit, I want to show some data, but before I do that, I just want to show what are some relevant angles in this setup. So when I show the data, it's going to be with these arrows in the middle here, in which the 111 projection is directly to the left, and our magnetic tweezer starts here at 0 and then moves in the counterclockwise direction. And the data I'm showing here is preliminary data in which we have a DNA molecule and a magnetic nanoparticle tethered to that DNA molecule. However, there's only one binding site between the DNA molecule and the magnetic nanoparticle. So the nanoparticle is pretty much free to turn, and the DNA is not going to be able to exert any torque on it. That's just kind of like a calibration for our main experiment. So yeah, and this is what we call the simple tether case. So here's some of our data here. So this is the vector field produced by a magnetic nanoparticle tethered to our diamond surface. And I'm going to show this as a function of our magnetic tweezer angle. So here we start with the angle 0. And as we step, I'm plotting the static and magnetic tweezer fields. And we can see that there is a change in orientation of the magnetic nanoparticle as we change our fields. So I'm just going to step a little bit backwards. And I'm really taking advantage that this is a poster session, so I'm showing some stuff that's not so perfect. What we can see in this step and this step here is kind of a loss of signal. And what's happening, we think, in this case is that since there is no DNA influence on the nanoparticle, at these low, when the static field and the magnetic tweezer field are almost anti-aligned, in this case they are anti-aligned, then the total field experienced by the particle is quite low. And so the particle is able to, due to thermal energy, it's able to fluctuate over many angles. And our long time resolution data here, we don't pick up that much signal. But when we get to a higher field strength, then the orientation is more locked to our external field, and we're able to image the reorientation of the nanoparticle. So yeah, this is where we are. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to skip that slide. Okay, let me just skip to the end. I thought I hid these slides, but you get to see some raw data. So yeah, so this is what I'm working on right now. And moving on, the next step in this experiment is to use DNA, in which there are multiple binding sites of the DNA molecule on the magnetic nanoparticle, so that the DNA is able to exert some torque on it. Then fit that magnetic nanoparticle moment that I measure versus our applied field. And from that, we will be able to extract torque. And preliminarily, this work, we want to look at the length dependence of this bend stiffness. So we can go really small. We can get down to like 10 or 20 nanometer long, free, double-stranded DNA. And so yeah, we're interested in kind of exploring that range and seeing how much this DNA bends. And the next work that we want to do, moving on from this, is to change actually the sequence. Look at the sequence-dependent bending of that DNA. So all in all, I was really excited to share this work with you because I think it's really cool that we're taking this quantum technology and not imaging quantum stuff. We're imaging classical stuff, right? Like nanoparticle magnetic fields, but it is really pushing our biology, what we can learn about biology forward using this quantum technology. So yes, and with that, I'll thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to check them out.
That was outstanding. This is the first time I've seen anything like this. And it's just really refreshing to see that you can use NV color centers and diamond in the readout processes, which was really well understood, and put a magnetic structure on, tethered to DNA. I mean, you know, that's an incredible experimentation work, even though you're at the rudimentary stage where you're connecting it and tethered in, you know, a simple configuration. You're looking to expand that. This is really incredible, and to see that imagery. I'm going to check real quick to see if there's questions out in the chat. If not, then I'll ask a couple that I was thinking of. It says, Sean, what are the primary failure mechanisms of your apparatus? That's a good question, because I was thinking about the actual fluid chamber itself, right? And how do you keep that thing stable enough to be able to do what you're doing? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So I learned a lot about biophysics in the past couple of years. It's not my expertise, but what they say in biophysics, I don't know if there's a nice slogan I can come up with now, but basically there are many, so just looking at the question in the chat, there are many mechanisms for failure. And really we're very biased towards success. So there have been many iterations of me learning how to make this biology, how to get everything to stick in the right way, and yeah, how to make it not leak out of the chamber and keep the diamond all there. So I'll just say the primary failure mechanisms. So the geometry of the tether is pretty lock and key. The attachment, so it's biotin streptavidin at one end and digoxygenin and anti-digoxygenin. So they're covalent bonds, they're very lock and key. So I think the primary failure mechanisms is double tethering. So like having two DNA tethers right next to each other and they both grab onto a single piece of nanoparticle. That's kind of like one of the primary failure mechanisms. But I'll just say that there are many, many things that go wrong, and then we focus on what goes right. Yeah, if that makes sense.
It does, and I mean, like I said, that so give me give me some vision here. Where do you see this in the future? If all things were perfect tomorrow, what could you do with this?
Well, I'll say that NV sensors in diamond as magnetic field sensors. I'm just gonna run with that. So this microscopy stuff is amazing, and I think there's a lot of single molecule biophysics that can be learned. Like for example, the DNA sequence dependent stuff that I was talking about. But I'm really interested in measuring fields in the human body, especially at room temperature under ambient conditions. And if we had diamonds that, if we had diamonds that were sufficiently high density, sufficiently high purity, and we were able to just put them all over a body and read it out, maybe imaging neuron currents in the body, or even brain signals. I mean, brain signals are done with other platforms right now. But since diamonds can be placed directly on the surface of skin, that kind of has an advantage over a lot of the magnetic imaging technology that's out there. So that, I'll say that. I think to me, that's the most exciting thing.
So you're gonna be fast friends with Element 6 and get your diamonds growing for you. Well, thank you so much, Sean. I mean, it's really groundbreaking work, and your team has done an excellent job. Are there any other questions out there? State-of-the-art NV color sensing diamonds is picotesla sensitivity. You need 10 femtotesla for cranial imaging of neural activity. Somebody's been thinking about this, Zashan. So, if you can go ahead and comment on that, that would be good.
Yeah, definitely the sensitivity is not there, but I think primarily it's a materials thing. I think if we can pack enough sensors into a nice diamond, I think we can, well, then there's also the readout problem where with this kind of sensing, we're looking for small changes on a really high background. Like these NVs are emitting so much light and they dim a little bit in the presence of magnetic field. So there's definitely some work to be done on how to get the light and shuttle the light differently. But yeah, I don't know, it doesn't seem physically like fundamentally limited. I think it's a big engineering problem, but maybe I'm just an optimistic grad student, but
that's helpful.
Exactly. Yeah.
If whoever asked that question, if you want to make a comment to the team of what you know about that to help this guy along, that would be helpful. And we got a couple minutes. Anyone?
Oh yeah, hi, my name's David Stoker. I'm at SRI International. We have done some work with NV Diamond, and we had written a proposal to apply NV Diamond to do, magnetoencephalography. And yeah, I think NV Diamond is a super interesting technology. He's using the quantum aspects of NV Diamond here for doing like a classical thing, but
Mhm.
It's really an interesting technology. So yeah, I support your enthusiasm.
So Stoker, I'd encourage you and Sean to get together after this and make it work, right? All right, guys, thanks. I appreciate that. Sean, thank you so much. And next up, we got, let's see, who is next? Forgive me, guys. Abu,
Hi, Charles.
hi, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Okay, so should I start sharing?
Yes, let's start sharing.
Yeah. Give me a second. Okay, thank you. So today I'm going to discuss regarding some theoretical and experimental findings of recently developed unconventional probe that we call entangled neutron probe. So the first question is, why do we need this kind of probe? So entangled is believed to be underlying mechanism of very strange and exotic behavior, many exotic behavior of materials. For example, high temperature superconductivity, multiferrics, and many other things. In the right, we see an illustration of resonating valence bond where each electron in the crystal is entangled with every other electron of the materials. So the first question is, how can we characterize or detect this kind of entanglement in materials? There are different scattering techniques that have been proved successful to extract dynamical and structural properties from materials, like Newton scattering technique, photon scattering, electron scattering. But this scattering technique has limited application to probe entanglement in materials. Therefore, we need a probe that has some tunability in its degrees of freedom, and it can definitely, it should have the capability to characterize and detect entanglement in materials. Okay, so entanglement, as you know, it's like an entangled state cannot be expressed by a product state. So in the right, we're seeing the measurement outcome from an entangled state psi E. This entanglement can be two types of. One is particle entanglement. So particle entanglement means it is entanglement between more than one particle. Like let's say a pair of photon or a pair of electron or a pair of neutron, whatever. So there are more than one particle, that's the thing. So let's say in box one, we have a electron, and in box two, we have another electron. So if they are entangled, that means when you measure entanglement, measurement output of box one depends on the measurement output of box two. So this is particle entanglement, and all we know about this. There are other kind of entanglement that is mode entanglement. So it can happen even within a single particle. So we don't need more than one particle to create mode entanglement. So this entanglement is entanglement between different degrees of freedom of a single particle. For example, in a neutron, a neutron can be entangled. One neutron can be entangled in its energy and spin. We'll talk about more in our next slide. Before going to that slide, I want to say that there are different kind of measure to there are different kind of measure to calculate the degrees of entanglement, both for particle and mode entanglement, like purity, fidelity. So these are the measure of entanglement: purity, fidelity, quantum fission information, and so on. Now I will discuss briefly about the probe we are talking about. This is a theoretical sketch. Our probe that we are talking about is a neutron probe where each neutron is entangled in its different degrees of freedom. So that is, it's a mode entangled. It's a mode entanglement. In the right, we are seeing a neutron is entangled in its path and spin. That is, path phi 0 has a spin up and path phi 1 has a spin down. So the neutron state is a superposition of this brown state and this blue state. Okay. Even these two paths, phi 0 and phi 1, can have different energy. In that case, we will call it strictly entangled because now it is entangled, the neutron is entangled in its 3 different degrees of freedom: energy, spin, and path. People can think more like they can incorporate orbital angular momentum, then it will be 4 degrees of freedom, they can incorporate momentum. So there can be, we can like hypothesize many more things. Now, in this kind of entangled probe, there are tunable parameters like entanglement length C, that is the distance between these two paths that we can change. And there are another tunable parameter that is delta. It's the size of the wave packet, transverse size of the wave packet. It's also sometimes called inherent coherence length in literature. As I say, this delta is tunable, and based on this size, this entangled beam can work in 2 different modes. One is small wave packet when delta is smaller than entanglement length. In the other case, when delta is large, it is called large wave packet mode. Okay, this is theoretical sketch. The question is, do we have something like this? Can someone realized or developed this kind of probe? The good thing is we already have something like this. Our experimental group have developed entangled probe of entangled neutron probe in different labs. That is, for example, ICES in England, Oak Ridge in Tennessee. Their first result is published in Nature Communication. To test the existence of entanglement in that probe, they use different Bell type inequalities, CHSH inequality, Marmin inequality, and they got very useful result, as you see in the bottom right corner. Okay, now we have this probe. The question is how this probe, yeah. Anyone stopping me? Okay, the question is how this probe is interact with the target material. In the middle, we see a panel where this entangled probe is interacting with a dimer. The dimer consists of 2 motionless electrons separated by some distance, say d. And this electron has a spin, and that spin can be oriented in any direction. Even spin of one electron can be entangled with the spin of the other electron of the dimer. To measure the entanglement of the dimer, one can use purity. So purity is a measure of entanglement. It can have value from 0 to 1. The lower the value of purity, the more the entangled the state is. That means purity 0 means the dimer state is maximally entangled. We calculate the differential cross section and the scattered polarization for this kind of scattering. And we see that the differential cross section and the polarization has some purity entanglement dependent term, purity or entanglement dependent term. Okay, so what result we have? Can this theory and this kind of setup can successfully distinguish between the entangled state and unentangled state of dimer? So first we work in the large wave packet limit. as we said that our instrument can work in two limits. In the large wave packet limit, we see that if the dimer state is unentangled, as showing in the left one, up X, then the scattered polarization varies from -1 to +1. Now, if the state becoming more entangled, in such case, still there are some variation, but the width of the variation get more sharper, get more smaller. As you see, in the middle, it's a partially entangled dimer state. For this dimer state, we see that the width of the peak is much smaller than the left one, than the unentangled case. So if we decrease the purity, that means if the degree of entanglement in the dimer state increases, the width of the peak get started to vanish. And at some point, when the state is maximally entangled, the width is 0. That means there is no variation in the polarization analysis, as we see in the right panel. So that means by using this technique, one should have successfully differentiate between an unentangled state and an entangled state. Even the state is partially entangled, one can also calculate the degree, measure the degree of entanglement of the dimer state. Okay. Now we'll see the other case, that is the small wave packet limit. In that limit, we see that the interference pattern gives some interesting result regarding the dimer quantum state. So dimer is like double slit. Why? Because it has two scattering center, two electrons. Each electron work like a slit. So the scattered wave from each electron, the scattered wave from these two electrons superimpose at the detector, and that creates interference pattern. As you see in the right one, the unentangled case. Here, we see that there is the interference pattern. Each petal of this flower left pattern is a maxima. Now, when the state becoming more and more entangled, interestingly, the interference pattern started to get vanished. We see in the middle picture, there are less, the interference pattern is like much more blurred. It's not like sharp like the unentangled case. So for a partially entangled state, the interference pattern is much more blurred. When the state gets maximally entangled, you do not see any petal. That is no interference pattern. So that it can clearly distinguish between a maximally entangled state from an unentangled case. When there is no interference, that means the target, the dimer state is maximally entangled. Okay. This we have, and now we are working on like more other things, like more complex materials, like chirality. We are developing, our experimental group is developing much more different entangled probe that, for example, can incorporate orbital angular momentum of neutron. And also there is a plan to do an experimental test of these findings, in particular the large wave packet limit. We hope that this will be done in the beginning of the next year or at the end of this year. Yeah, so thank you everyone, and please ask me question if you have.
Outstanding. I appreciate that, Irfan. That was an outstanding presentation, and entanglement probes are definitely something that your research exposed to me, and I think that there's plenty of opportunity for research in that area in quantum metrology. Right now, there is no questions in the chat, so you're off the hook because we're past 3 o'clock. So is there any questions? Well, listen, I want to thank all of the student presenters who, all the researchers who presented today, and all of the folks who participated from the Quantum Economic Development Consortium Workforce TAC. We will have our next workshop with all of the employers and invite all of these researchers back to hear from the companies that are looking for researchers like these fine researchers. And so Chris Bishop and I will be organizing that next event, and these gentlemen will have the opportunity to talk to companies out there to figure out if there's opportunities in the research areas that they discussed today. It's an important part of what we're doing in the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, and that is trying to match talent with, trying to make sure that the members of the QED-C have access to the latest and greatest researchers and the brightest minds in the industry. And so with that, I want to thank the folks who presented today. This will be recorded and published on the QED-C website. And that's it. Thanks for joining the call.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
Bye, guys.